Hello, welcome back to Rich Tech. Today I've got these two cables of an Apple MagSafe 2 charger. These cables are worn out, torn, and they can't be used. So I want to make these two cables to look new as this, or close to that. And is it possible? Stay tuned. Now, if you haven't subscribed, kindly subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate that. Like and also share the videos. Now, in order to create a new cable from this old one, we'll need to decide what we need here. The cable is obviously gone for both, but the important thing is these connectors. They are still usable, plus the cable holder, this piece. That one is still serviceable, so we are going to keep those two. And since we are not using the rest of the cable, we are going to cut it off and join new cables to this connector. And the new cables I've already identified. These are from another MacBook charger, which is dead. And these are two. This is the other cable. And I'll need, at the end of every cable, at the point where the cable meets the charger, they have this rubber insulation. This rubber junction gives it strength and provides a good interface. So we'll need that too, which already have one here. Obviously, to begin this repair, I'll need to cut off the unwanted portion of the cable. So I'll just cut it through this insulation, remove the insulation. I'll also cut this other one, and I'll be connecting this cable to this connector at that point. Now, because you're joining the new cable at around this point, we'll need to prepare the place where it is where we'll have our joint. So I'll cut off this top rubber insulation. It's important to know that it's only the top rubber insulation that we are cutting off, and we'll leave that. And to cut it, you just make a slight cut with your razor and pull this out. Make sure you do not cut the inner rubber insulation. Just pull this out. Once you pull it out, switch over the new cable. I'll do the same for this other. I've already cut it. Now here are the two cables with the rubber junction already slid in. I'm going to prepare these ends and this end for soldering. To do this, just cut off about 1 centimeter, or about over a centimeter, slightly over a centimeter from the edge. Remove the rubber insulation on this and do the same for the other one. Expose the positive wire inside. Cut off at least 5 millimeters from the end, and open up the portion which I want to solder, just like that. I'll do the same for this side and for this too. Expose the positive wire inside. Expose the positive wire. It's exposed. We only need that portion. Same to the other one. I'll not bore you with the details, but I wanted to show you this. I'll be connecting this positive to this positive by soldering it. Now I've prepared both ends of this cable on the connector side and on the connector side and on the cable side. I have stripped the positive wire and expose the wires underneath the insulation. Same to this other side, I'll be soldering those two together. Now at this point where we'll have the solder, there will be bare wire, and remember this side has insulation, that other side has insulation, so that this negative wire does not short the positive wire. So at the end of this soldering, we need to cover this joint with some insulator, and the insulator here we're using is a heat shrink tubing. It's white in color, you can't see it clearly. Let me show you on this side. Here it is. I've slid it over this positive wire before I start the soldering, so at the end of the soldering I'll just slide it over the joint and cover the joint. And you can also see that I've held the heat shrink tubing with this blue wire. I've done also the same on this side. I've held this one with this white wire and held it in place with tape. This is because I don't want this heat shrink tubing to shrink when I solder this point, and because there will be a lot of heat generated. I'm about to solder the cable or the wire on the cable side to the wire on the connector side, and to hold the connector down firmly so that it doesn't move, I've placed my long nose pliers over it. Now let's solder this. You have to make sure that the wires are completely straight. Move this so that you see. That's the solder. You can see it's able to hold the connector. They can pull the connector and it feels firm. You can hold the connector side and it also holds the cable. This is the result after soldering. You should ensure that this area which has been soldered does not bulge out, because you want to maintain it, if possible, the same size as that of the wire, so that when you apply insulation on top and we add the other layers, there will be no bulge outside. Now once you do that, we'll remove this heat shrink tubing which we'll use to insulate the joint, and that's what I've done with this other soldered joint. I've already shrunk the heat shrink tubing over the joint. You can see it, even though it's white as the insulation of the positive wire, you can see that the joint is well insulated. There is no bulge at that point. Now before you slide this heat shrink tubing over the joint, you can apply some glue to the joint. After shrinking the heat shrink tubing with some heat from our soldering gun, this is the result. So to connect the two negative wires, first of all you lay the ones on the connector side down flat over the joint, then you lay these others on the cable side over the joint. Once the wires are aligned one on top of the other, you can put glue, just a little glue on each side, then roll it using a piece of nylon paper. Now if you do a good job, this is the result you should have. Now at this point we will need to test each of these cables if they are working. Therefore I'll connect each to this MacBook Air. Now this cable is working, as you can see. The next step is to pull this rubber insulation over this joint, and I've already done so up to this point. And pulling it is quite easy. You can just hold it tightly and pull back on the cable. The rubber insulation will slide over the joint and cover this portion. Now I've left this small portion here because I want to apply some glue here, so that when I pull it on top of this joint to close this junction, it may hold it in place and it may not slide back. Now we'll apply glue very quickly to this joint. Once the glue is all round, then we'll pull this insulation to close up that gap. This should be done quickly so that the glue does not set before the joint is covered. If you do a good job, this is what you should end up with. These joints have turned out to be so good. Next step is to pull this outer rubber insulation over the joint and to complete this repair. And for that, we'll still use super glue over this, then pull the rubber insulation over the super glue up to that point. And with each layer that we add, we increase the strength of this joint, so the final product will be as good as a new cable. Then let's slide this insulation over the joint quickly. Of course, don't touch the glue with your fingers. And here we are. Wipe off excess glue. While it's setting, you can do all the small and minor adjustments. It's basically to make this joint as round as possible so that it doesn't look any different from one which has not been repaired. And this is done. You can see, you cannot tell if there's a repair. It is as good as one which has never been opened. This has never been opened. As you can see, it is as good as this. I'll do the same for this, and we'll see the result of both. Now these are the completed cables. Next is to test these cables if they really work. So I'll connect this to a MacBook. You can see this is working. Now both of these cables are working. And so that's how you repair your MacBook charger cables. What remains now is this junction, which is found at the charger side. And these are very easy to prepare. I hope in my next video I'll be able to show you how to prepare these junctions. If you like this content, kindly consider subscribing to the channel. Also like the videos. You can share them, give comments. I'd like to hear from you. So that's how you repair your MacBook charger cables if you have any defect with them. Thanks again for your time. I really do appreciate. Watch out for my next videos.